Crypto markets have left people feeling extremely confused this week because while BNB hit $1,000 for the first time ever, we also saw over $1 billion of long positions liquidated, making it the single largest liquidation cascade we've seen so far in 2025. BTC, ETH, and Sol all fell significantly in the process, and the total crypto market cap even fell below $4 trillion, leading some pundits to once again start calling for cycle tops. But the reality is that both the US stock market and gold prices are at an all-time high versus the dollar, and the long list of expert opinions and bullish indicators that we're about to see all point towards alt season not yet being over. So the real question is, can Sol really reach $500 before 2026, as plenty of experts have long suggested? Over $1 billion in long positions liquidated in the biggest cascade of 2025, BTC, ETH, and Sol all taking a hit. But zooming out reveals a very different picture, because the bullish reality is that the likelihood of an early Sol ETF approval is rising. And we're now seeing new datcos like Forward Industries and Helios aggressively buying Sol, reminiscent of Michael Saylor's BTC accumulation that pushed Bitcoin to a $2.4 trillion market cap.
I think people really realize that DATs are potentially a form of better exposure than buying the underlying, right? By owning a DAT, you really get the benefit of Pantera as an asset manager growing your productive treasury in a productive way and generating yield, up to 7% yield. And in addition, through financial engineering, capital markets activity, you can actually go out and buy more Solana over time. And so by investing in our DAT, it is possible to own more Solana per share over time than just owning Solana itself. And so we're seeing a lot of excitement from the market at what we can really achieve with Helios HSDT.
We also see Solana stablecoin issuance hitting new highs, with Circle minting $1.25 billion of USDC on Solana this week alone, and that pushed the 2025 total to over $30 billion of USDC. Solana's TVL and network revenues are also climbing daily, with the ecosystem TVL now approaching $40 billion and showing significant growth momentum. But there is, of course, more, because RWAs like tokenized stocks are exploding in activity. And when you consider all of these factors together, it doesn't seem impossible to think that Sol could hit $500 by 2026, which is of course a target that 10% of speculators on Polymarket are already betting on. Let's start with datcos here, digital asset treasury companies, which now hold over $100 billion in crypto collectively, because Solana digital asset products, including ETFs, ETPs, and funds, recorded $127 million in inflows last week, extending their streak to 15 consecutive weeks and pushing the total AUM to a record $4.3 billion. Helios Medical Technologies closed a $500 million private placement to launch its own Solana treasury company, and we just heard from Pantera's Cosmo Zhang why that trend is growing. In fact, Helios has already begun its Solana treasury strategy, acquiring 760,000 Sol at an average cost of $231. That's basically top blasting. And the company now also holds $335 million in cash for further Sol purchases. Then of course, we have another recent addition to the Solana datco landscape with Forward Industries, which raised $1.65 billion to kickstart its own Sol accumulation. And they are aiming to become the market's biggest Solana DAT.
Look, there's obviously a lot of digital asset treasury companies out there, and we want to be not only the top Solana-based digital asset treasury, we want to be the top digital asset treasury in the world. Our aspirations is that this is a publicly traded permanent capital vehicle, and we have aspirations for this thing to become a $50 billion plus publicly traded company over the next 5 to 10 years.
Samani then went on to explain how exactly the value accrual mechanisms could work to deliver value to shareholders.
We as the sponsors of this vehicle can do interesting things to deliver increasing Sol per share for our shareholders. And there's a number of things we can do to that effect. I think probably the most interesting is actually M&A. There's probably going to be 30, maybe 40 of these digital asset treasuries out there, not only Solana related, but all the other assets too.
Yeah.
And I don't think the market's going to sustain 30 or 40 of these things. No. And so there's going to be a ripe opportunity for M&A. I think given the caliber of our team and just the knowledge we have with banking across, especially Galaxy, like we're in a prime position to execute on that. The second, I think, really lucrative opportunity is in actually arbitraging capital market structures, meaning we're working on getting loans from banks, hopefully in the 5%, maybe 6% range. And then we can deploy that into Solana DeFi at, today probably close to 15%.
Sure.
And arbitrage that spread. That's obviously a very sexy story. Shareholders love hearing stuff like that.
And finally, when asked about the difference between Forward Industries and the OG DATCO, which is of course Michael Saylor's strategy, Samani explained how Forward Industries might actually be in a better position.
So MicroStrategy, or I guess Strategy now, pioneered this concept, and they're issuing these preferred perpetuals. And the problem Strategy has is they are paying a 9% coupon, but they have no cash flow off of their Bitcoin. We can actually produce cash flow both in SOL terms and in dollar terms by tapping into the native Solana staking and DeFi ecosystems. So it actually makes the vehicle as a whole a lot more financially congruent than something like Strategy.
Now, another big move from Solana DATCOs this week came from DeFi Development Corp, who just announced the launch of Korea's first Solana digital asset treasury in partnership with Fragmetric. DFDV's COO Parker explains why this isn't financial engineering. Because with their new treasury accelerator, DFDV is actually packaging everything from asset management and validator services all the way to fundraising support, and they're backing it with direct SOL investments. The strategy is quite simply to expand Solana DATs globally to lock up even more SOL and generate yield while keeping exposure to that underlying SOL. Now, interestingly, with the recent announcement of DFDV UK, which became the first UK-based SOL treasury, it's fair to say that this tide of DAT expansion looks set to tilt even further in Solana's favor. And you might also remember that just last month, DFDV became the first publicly traded Solana treasury vehicle to ring that Nasdaq closing bell on Times Square, which of course was another monumental milestone for the entire Solana ecosystem. DFDV's total profit reportings showed over $152 million of profit from a $320 million investment as of September 15th, prompting Parker to postulate that a 10K SOL is not only programmed, but that 10K SOL is the future floor. So, publicly traded companies are aggressively increasing their SOL holdings, and this is evidently great for both the ecosystem as a vote of confidence and the long-term health of the network as a whole. But another rapidly growing part of Solana is the RWA space. We simply have to talk about Solana RWAs, because 2025 has been one of the strongest years for real-world assets coming on-chain, with a 35% growth in total RWA market share in the last month alone. Now, tokenization has gone from a fairly niche concept to being fairly mainstream, and that includes traction for both TradFi and crypto circles, which has grown the market cap from under $10 billion in 2024 to over $30 billion today. One of the major catalysts for this development was, of course, the landmark Genius Act, which also gave stablecoins a nice regulatory tailwind.
Think about this. Today, we have a payment system that was designed in the 1970s and 80s. It's archaic. It takes days to clear. What we're talking about with the stablecoin legislation, with the Genius Act, is to put us into the 24th century with a new payment system that takes advantage of the blockchain technology.
Here's Kyle Samani once again weighing in on how monumental that development was for us as industry participants.
But I think a huge part of that has just been regulatory, which you could never forecast. Genius happening has changed a lot of things. Even 30 days ago, it was like illegal for anyone in Silicon Valley, like any of the big tech companies, to actually do anything productive with crypto. That is no longer the case as of roughly 30 days ago.
Now, off the back of this immense progress, we heard just yesterday that the Kazakhstan central bank has launched its very own Solana stablecoin called EVO with the ticker KZTE. Launched in partnership with MasterCard, this is a first of its kind for Solana. But before we get too caught up in stables, let's have a quick look at one of Solana's fastest growing RWA corners, of course, tokenized stocks. Because RWAs overall started 2025 with a market cap of $15.8 billion, and they now stand at over $30 billion. That's an 87% year-to-date increase. Very impressive, very significant. But perhaps most interestingly for us, we see commodities and stocks are also rising with 6.8% and 2.3% market share respectively, with tokenized stocks growing 146% year-on-year. Remora Markets has had a stellar rise with over $3 million in volume traded in just the first 3 weeks alone, with popular stocks like Nvidia, Tesla, Circle, SPY, and of course MicroStrategy already available to trade. The Remora Markets team has collaborated with Solana teams like DeFi Tuna, and traders can now explore Meteora pools with impressive APRs. Plus, you've got 2 million STEP tokens worth over $100,000, which is also up for grabs. Now, it's worth mentioning here that two of the interesting results of Remora Markets launching has been firstly the arbitrage opportunity, where on-chain prices of stocks like SPY have been lower than the regular exchange prices, which of course creates a nice arbitrage opportunity. The second and unintended yet extremely bullish outcome for Solana is that for both whales and degens who want to stable up towards the end of this cycle, they no longer need to take their profits off-chain. Now, with the proliferation of tokenized stocks and liquidity pools, they can simply buy stocks on-chain, provide liquidity to, let's say, the Tesla USDC pools or even Nvidia USDC pools, and they can earn rewards without removing Solana liquidity. Over time, this will likely become a more widely adopted strategy and, of course, reduce volatility. Although it's worth mentioning here that Helios co-founder Matt rightly pokes fun at this reality. And, of course, a much-needed reality check for us here, because stablecoin issuance and tokenized equities alone won't push Solana to $500, at least not likely by the year end. Although, as we saw earlier, stablecoin issuance on Solana has accelerated to eye-watering levels, and Circle minted $750 million in 12 hours just yesterday. So let's do some numbers. For context, when BNB hit $1,000, it surpassed Intel's market cap by reaching $142 billion. So for Solana to hit $500 by year end, as we see both polymarket speculators and plenty of CT pundits postulating around, its market cap would need to climb from today's $120 billion to $231 billion. That's an increase of $125 billion, or about 117% higher than current levels. Now, with the pending ETFs, DATCOs, and explosive stablecoin and RWA growth, that kind of move will be tough, but it's not impossible. After all, if you think about the last cycle, BNB exploded from $40 to over $690 in just 5 months. That's a 1,700% surge. So if this cycle even rhymes with that kind of move, a $500 sol before year end goes from being absolutely improbable to just about within reach. But a very important reminder here that none of the information on Solana Floor is legal advice, financial advice, life advice, investment advice, or any kind of advice. The information in this video and Solana Floor more generally is solely for informational and educational purposes. Now, if you do get any value from our journalism, then I urge you to like the video so more people can see it, and please do subscribe to the channel to help it grow. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time for more of the very latest.